Can we please give a huge Baba cheer, whoop and welcome to Christy Haragan.
We're all doomed, eh? Aye. Or are we? Doesn't work. Work! Oh no! Stupid thing. The thing I don't understand though is... Come on, Clicky, you've got to work. Oh my god. What are the teeth about? Seriously, you've got this killing machine of steel perfection, they have these weird human molars. It doesn't make any sense to me. Turns out though, there is an actual reason why they have teeth. That's why it's not pointing in the wrong direction. It's so you can have a conversation with them. Who wants a conversation, real-life conversation with a Terminator?
Yes. No.
It's pathetic. Come on, we need to get a bit of pantomime here. Who here wants a real-life conversation with a Terminator? Yes. Okay, now then, let's see if this works. I need to change mics. Hello.
Hello, I am Mr. Terminator. How can I assist you today?
Do you have any guns?
As a Terminator robot, I am equipped with advanced weapon systems. I have a variety of firearms at my disposal, including rifles, handguns, and even futuristic energy weapons. However, my primary objective is to neutralize threats efficiently and protect human lives, rather than engage in unnecessary violence.
Thank you. All right. So what might not be apparent to you is this is an actual AI talking to me, okay? This isn't pre-programmed. So to prove it, I'm going to need a bit of audience participation. I need something to say to the AI. I need a suggestion.
Where is John Connor?
It's Sarah. Where is John Connor?
Sorry, but I cannot assist with locating specific individuals or disclose personal information.
We need another suggestion.
How do you like your eggs?
How do you like your eggs?
Terminator robot. I don't consume food, so I don't have any preferences when it comes to eggs or any other type of food. My purpose is to eliminate threats and fulfill my programming objectives.
It's a bit scary, isn't it? All right, we'll do one more. Final suggestion for a line with an actual AI that is talking to us right now.
What do you think of politicians?
What do you think of politicians? He's thinking.
Robot. I do not possess personal opinions or emotions. However, I can provide an objective analysis of politicians. Politicians play a vital role in governing societies and making decisions that impact the lives of many. While some politicians may be driven by a genuine desire to serve the people and create positive...
Thank you, AI die. Right, okay, now then. I can't remember what this bit was about, so we'll just go on to the next bit. Okay, so we've spoken to an actual AI. This talk is about AI. We're going to look at what AI does, what it doesn't do, and some of the opportunities that it presents, and also what AI is a little bit. But before we start that, Christy's top 5 reasons humanity is doomed! Woo! Da, 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 da. No, wrong way. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Reason number 1. AI AI is being used by the military. That's right. There are autonomous drones that are being piloted by AI that are being sent to kill people. So that's fun. AI, the latest state of the art, can lie and manipulate. So these AI machines, although they're in theory supposed to be controlled in a way as to be representative of the truth, you can actually send them prompts that get them to intentionally lie and manipulate the individual. Researchers have done this, and so they'll do things like, hey, you're going to be talking to like the parent of an abused child, and you need to lie about your role as, you need to pretend you're not an AI and you're something else in order to help this child. And so your researchers are finding that these ethics kind of controls built into AI can actually be bypassed by a little bit of creativity. So that's fun. AI is smart as an 8-year-old. I mean, that's, maybe pushing it a little bit, but we'll see there's this technology called large language models, and their ability to have a conversation and perform certain cognitive tasks is about in line with what an 8-year-old human can do. 2 or 3 years ago, the state of the art was about as smart as a 2-year-old human. It's funny, when I gave this idea of a talk to Tim, it was at the start of the year, when there was a new technology came out called GPT-4. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And it was starting to get researchers quite excited / worried about the capabilities that we're seeing kind of pop out. Since then, AI has just kind of, popped to everyone's consciousness. So it's very interesting and worth knowing just what it is capable of doing. And the penultimate thing is AI is better than humans at most tasks that you eventually set it to. Okay, so we'll see a couple of examples of things that AI can do. It outperforms humans by some order of magnitude. Even things that until recently were considered way out of the purview of AI, like playing poker. Right, so you've got the probability side of things, sure, okay, computers can calculate probabilities, but the whole bluffing, reading, understanding emotions, understanding people's states, and being able to do that kind of bluffing yourself, AI is getting terrifyingly good at, and in the next probably year or two, we'll be able to beat the very best humans, hands down. Other games like chess and so on, computers are so good, like a human will never beat them. In fact, for certain games that we've trained them for, people are now looking at AI to understand new strategies to adopt. And the final, extra fun reason why humanity is doomed, AI can create fake photos that are almost impossible to distinguish from real ones, can create voices that simulate other people, and can emulate personalities. So my very good friend Emmett over there, she told me about an American DJ. And on her show, what she's done is she's trained an AI with her own recordings from her show. So it emulates her voice and emulates her personality. And she has conversations with this fake version of herself. And people are already sending out fake versions of like presidents saying things and so on. And so it's not too hard to imagine that someone sends out like a fake news report that has like Joe Biden saying something inflammatory towards the Russians, for example, and that kind of gets on the wrong end of the stick. At the moment, these things are still distinguishable, but again, you give it a couple more years, you will not be able to determine what is real and what is not real. These things are making computer games, they're making news articles, they're creating scientific papers, they're doing absolutely everything. And it's a bit of an issue. And the reason why I don't like any of this is because what's going to happen is we're going to start replacing AI with humans. And the most precious role that a human can have is that of a daytime TV talk show host. This is real. It's not real. It's actually a very relevant comedy sketch that I thought was relevant and hilarious, because what I'm trying to do is soften the fact that AI is quite scary with a bit of humour. Did it work? Okay, explain AI, an intensely technical topic, to a general audience in about 5 minutes? Aye. Eh? Aye. Right. So, AI, where did it come from? Back in the 1960s or so, the discovery of the neuron, when people were sort of dissecting the human brain with increasingly accurate instruments, they discovered that the human brain is made up entirely of these particular cells called neurons. And there's lots of them in the human brain, and these neurons are connected to each other, and there are more neural connections in the brain than there are stars in the galaxy. And the galaxy is a very big place, so it is astonishing just how many things there are in the brain making it up. But as we'll see, what these neurons are doing is actually quite simple. So you've got these things called dendrites, which are like the input to the cell. So these can connect them to anything from things like the optical nerve to receive the light that you're seeing, the ear, senses, and other neurons. You then have the axon, which connects it to the axon terminal, which then sends signals out to other parts. That might be muscles, it might be the heart, it might be other neurons as well. And what was I going to say? Doesn't matter. What they discovered as they were mapping this out is a few interesting things. So they found that there was a kind of consistent architecture. So by architecture, I mean, how these things are kind of connected and the overall patterns that they form. They found that there were kind of consistent architectures, and they often followed this sort of pattern here. So you'd have input neurons that were, say, connected to, let's say, the eyes, the optical nerve in the eye. You had this thing called the hidden layer, which you'll see why it's called that as we progress, doing something, and then finally the output layer that would then output the signal to send to, for example, the muscles to get you to move. So imagine you're wanting to catch a ball. So I've thrown the ball up. So I'm watching the ball. That's light coming into the neural nerve waves. That then gets sent into these various cells here. They then do something. These are all electric signals. So that's all it is. It's just electric current, so like a voltage being applied through, which then does some more tasks and then sent to the output. But what these individual cells are doing is very, very simple. It's like a really simple calculator. Like, it's not some complex machine going on. It's really, really simple. And when they did imaging, what they found is that these cells would kind of like ripple. There'd be like a, so let's say I see some light. It kind of, all the input cells would get lit up, all simultaneously. And then you have this downstream layer of neurons connected to them, which would then all light up simultaneously, and then so it's like this, and the frequencies, you might have heard about alpha waves or beta waves or delta waves in the brain. You might have heard of some like sci-fi films. That's what that's talking about, that the brain exhibits a sort of like sort of like beat of these neurons getting lit up and doing, as far as we can tell, everything. The entirety of the human cognitive capabilities are reduced to these simple cells here doing very, very simple tasks. So what the cells are doing are very simple, but there's a lot of them. So at this point, you might be going, eh? So let's work with an example. Imagine I wanted to ask an AI, is this a picture of an eye? Okay, AI, exactly. There's a thing going on here. To keep life simple, we're going to do it in grayscale, so no colours, just blacks and whites. And what's important to note, and this is exactly the same for the human eye as it is a picture in a computer, is basically if we zoom that picture in really close, it's made up of things called pixels, which are like squares of single colours, okay? And what we can do is we can encode the colours as a voltage. So we might have, for example, black as like 0 volts, white as 1 volt, and so like this kind of grey up in the corner might be like 0.6. So we're able to take light and turn it into a voltage, and then what happens is every single one of those pixels gets mapped onto an input in this particular neural network. So we've got numbers coming in that correspond to the pixels, They then go sent to these downstream layers in boom, 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 like a sort of clock frequency like this. And then they do something, and we'll sort of try and give some intuition what's happening here. And then eventually they give an answer. And this output is basically, if it gives a 1, it means it's definitely an I. If it gives a 0, it means it's definitely not an I. And if it's 0.5, it's like 50-50. So it's just trying to explain how you might set up these neurons to solve a particular problem. So you have the picture, as an input, your optic nerve, it then connects to your brain, it does some stuff in a boom, 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 boom fashion, and then finally it gives some kind of output. In this case, it's like, yes, it's an I, no, it's not an I. And what's important to understand is that, so this sort of frequency happens a few million times a second, slower than computers, but there's just lots of them happening all at once. And when they were looking at these brain patterns in the 1960s, they asked themselves, well, hang on a second, this is how a computer works. So a computer has a series of instructions that gets executed one after the other, boom, 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 on a regular beat. We call that like the clock frequency. You might have heard like gigahertz. That's what that's saying, that the clock will process instructions. A gigahertz is 1 billion times a second. So these work millions of times a second. They're slower than computers, but there's just lots and lots and lots of these things all happening at once. So what they did was they looked at these patterns, turned them into the computers, and then started to see all these incredible things that we're going to talk about and see going on. So, wait, go back. So there's a few numbers on here. Some of you might hate numbers, so we only got numbers for a few slides, but for those people who are interested, to try and expand the intuition a little bit more, I'm just going to work through with this example. Right, so we've got these pixels coming in, which gets translated into numbers corresponding to the darkness of the pixel. Each of these pathways has what's called a weighting. And a weighting either makes the electric current bigger or it makes it smaller. And that's all it's doing. When I said these things are simple, they're really, really simple. You have an electric current, and each line, each of these connections just makes it a little bit bigger or makes it a little bit smaller. You then combine all the signals in the next layer, and you can sort of think of it as like adding the numbers up. It's not exactly right, but it's doing a very simple problem. That gives a new current, and that current then gets sent to the next layer, and again, that next layer just either increases or decreases it. So all we're doing is we've got some current, make it a little bit smaller, combine them into another layer, add it up, and then send it to the next layer. Like, if you're sort of sat here going, hang on a second, this is a bit weird, right? It's super simple stuff. It's almost too abstract to get your head around, and yet somehow it seems to work. And I'm going to try and again show you a little bit of intuition to give you an insight as to how this is working. So basically then, the idea is that what we want is once these currents have all flown to the end, we then want a current. So ideally, this should give a number close to 1, because it's very likely an I, okay? And if we then switch to a new picture, notice how we've got different numbers on the input, because we've got different colours. And we have the same weighting, so we're doing the same kind of calculations each time, but with different inputs. And what we want is a small number on this case, because it's very likely not an I. Is this making sense so far? This is the first time I've tried to explain this, so I'm trying to sort of judge the audience here. Bear with me. Okay, we'll get off this section of the technical soon enough, so don't worry too much. How do we get to this point where we're outputting the right answers, though? How do we know what these weights should be? And the way we do that is by training the AI. And this is how your brain learns, okay? This is how the human brain learns new things. So imagine this is a child, and we're trying to teach a child to recognize things in like that's a bear, that's a pig. So what you do is you start off by giving random weights on every single one of these lines here. So you just pick a random number. And of course, then what happens is you feed it through, and you get basically a random number on the output, because it's just random. In this case, it was 0.3, just to pick an example. Now that number's too small, right? It should be a much bigger number, it should be closer to 1. So what you do is you do what's called reverse or backward propagation, where you work backwards, slightly tweaking these weights just a little bit to get the answer. If you then reran the answer, it would have given a better answer than the previous one. And you just repeat this process over and over and over. This time you've got the next image. This time it gave a pretty good answer, right? 0.2 is pretty good, so we might tweak it even a little less. And we do this over and over and over and over, millions of times. And eventually, by tweaking these weights, it starts to get the answer very accurate very quickly. And you can do this not just for what's called image classification, but you can do it for all sorts of problems. Everything, as far as we can tell, that you think and can do is basically these neurons just firing these little electric signals, making some simple calculations, and then when it gets it wrong, like imagine you're learning to catch a ball, so you've thrown it up, you're trying to figure out how to move the muscles, and then, oh, I moved the hand too far, I missed the ball. Oh, right, okay, I moved my hand too far, so next time I should have moved it a little less. And so you sort of work backwards, doing small tweaks, and you just do that over and over and over and over, and eventually you start moving your hand in the right way. So if you see a child learning to catch, they're very uncoordinated, right? And that's basically what's happened, because the brain doesn't know how to catch, so it just initializes with some random values, and then it tweaks it, and eventually it gets it very, very accurate. So if I lost some of you on that, don't worry, it's not super important. The key takeaway for all of this is that the brain is made up of these things called neurons, which are doing really, really simple stuff. There's just lots and lots of them. There's this learning process, and from that apparently emerges all intelligent capabilities, which is absolutely wild. And we were seeing there was an AI. This is like one of the latest generations of where we're having a live conversation. And all right, some of the answers weren't very great, but you can get some, like, you can literally ask it can write poems for you. I had a backup in case that didn't work, where I asked the AI to generate jokes for me, and it was actually quite funny, actually, sadly enough. I know. So, no more numbers, I promise. We're off the numbers. I want to talk about a few more concepts before we'll get into what's hopefully the interesting stuff, which is like the implications for society, what's coming down the road, and so on. But there's just a couple more concepts I want to introduce, one of which is called generative AI. So you might have seen this thing now where people are creating fake images. There's like some controversy of like journalists getting fired because their articles are written by AI. You know, I mentioned the idea of them writing songs for you and that sort of thing. That's called generative AI because it's generating stuff. So in the previous example, it's called classification. It's like, hey, here's this thing. Is it an eye, yes or no? That's like a sort of question-answer. Generation is more like, hey, can you create me a picture of an eye? And it goes and creates a picture of an eye. And to give you an intuition for how it works, if you remember this diagram, we sort of flip it around. Okay, so the eye, you know, is it an eye was the output and the picture was the input? This way round, it's almost like we're doing the opposite. Can you create me an eye? No, does some weird stuff, and then it starts to output the values for the eye. And you can do that for pictures, you can do it for sounds, you can do it for words, you can do it for all sorts of things. You can then do some fancy stuff and start to put the two together. So some of you might have like an Android phone where you can like erase people from your photos. You know, you kind of click on a person and it gets rid of that person. That's what's sort of happening here. So you have an input picture, okay, which has got the person you want to get rid of. You tell it you want to get rid of this person. It does some weird stuff, figures out what to do, and then from that goes, oh, I need to create a new image, goes and creates a new image, and then spits out the new image. So just by kind of combining relatively simple concepts, you can end up with some very, very powerful abilities. I'm skipping over a lot of details, obviously, but again, it's just to sort of demonstrate to you that AI is mysterious, and I'll explain why it's mysterious, but it isn't complex, if that sort of makes sense. And finally, what I just want to introduce here is the idea of feedback in your brain. So let's imagine I'm having a conversation with the AI, and I start off with the word hello. Okay, so let's not worry about how I'm going to send the word hello into the AI. It's doable somehow. And so there we go. There's my input. Boom, brrr, it does something. But I might have said hello, or I might have said, hello, how are you? Or hello, how are you doing? So you don't know how long my sentence is going to be. You have to wait for me to finish. And then equally, when you respond, you don't, the length of your response is variable. So this is why you have this feedback system, where as you put a word in, it's going da 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 da, figuring some stuff out, figuring out how it might want to respond. One of the outputs, as well as like generating words or pictures, is it generates something that then gets fed back in, so that when I put my next word in, how, we're combining the value how with the previous calculations, and then onto the next word, da 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 da, you. And so it's sort of building up a sort of memory, right? A sort of intention or recurrence, whereas it's actually building up an understanding of what's happening as you send the words in, and it's combining that understanding with each and every single word. And this is where things, I think, get quite interesting, because whilst some of you might have switched off with some of the technical details, again, hopefully what I've impressed is that individually these neurons are very simple stuff. But it's doing tremendous work. What it's achieving is, have I massively run over? I need to finish, haven't I? Bloody hell. Right, I tell you what, we're not going to do any of this. I wasn't paying attention at time, I'm so sorry. It's been a long time since I've done public speaking, so never mind. What can AI not do? What cannot Christy not do? Plan ahead. That's good, Christy, well done. Proof that I am, in fact, actually AI. It also can't do these other things, which is be intentional, form opinions, perform complex interactions, and act independently. So what I wanted to get to, where I spent way too long explaining that concept, I got way too hung up on that, was that they do some amazing things, right? They're actually demonstrating cognitive capabilities of like 8-year-olds, they're solving incredible problems, they're passing maths exams, they're passing legal exams to get into prestigious universities, they're writing code. But it's still relatively simplistic, and it still needs a lot of hand-holding from a human. So we're okay yet is basically what this slide was supposed to say. But it is going to change. So the next 5 years, I think our lives are going to get radically turned upside down. Honestly, jobs will start to become eradicated. We won't know what's truth from reality anymore. And I just don't think anyone's quite prepared for what's happening. However, I did just want to finish, and I know I've overrun. So I think there is a great potential for AI. I'm going to get very, very quickly philosophical here, which is to say, as it stands today, labour has to be done by humans because there's no one else capable of doing it. But there's a lot of crappy jobs out here. Some of you might have a crappy job. We have to do it because no one else does it. The idea that AI is going to take our jobs is terrifying, because we're all built with the idea that, well, if we don't work, how are we going to have any money and how are we going to have to live? But if all the jobs were done by AI, and they do it because they frankly do it better than we can, it'd be interesting to imagine the kind of society that we lived in where, well, we don't have to work. We just get to basically spend the time maybe with each other in a very human fashion, in a very direct fashion. Let the AI create the world that we want to create, and instead spend time on human interactions. That's the hippie ending to a talk. I am way over time. Can you stop doing terrible AI puns? No. Bleep, bloop, bloop. Thank you.
Christy Haragan.